Hello, my name is Abhishek, and this is my podcast, Fight the Resistance. In this podcast, we are going to talk about insulin resistance. What is insulin resistance? What causes insulin resistance? How can we test whether we have insulin resistance or not? And why is it important for us to find out whether we have insulin resistance or not? Some myths and facts around diet, supplementation, and exercises for insulin resistance. My goal with this podcast is to reach all of you listeners and provide meaningful and scientific information to help manage your condition. I started this podcast because what I figured out is that the fitness content scene nowadays does not really cater to the people who would derive the most benefit out of regular physical activity. Although there is excellent content regarding exercise and nutrition out there. My objective is to fill that gap, bring the best of exercise and nutrition science to people who are suffering from insulin resistance, make people aware that their condition is manageable by regular exercise and nutrition. So I welcome you all. Thank you for joining me. Before we begin the podcast, let me clarify what my target audience is. My target audience is people who have insulin resistance, who know that they have insulin resistance, have been told by the doctors, and insulin resistance or disorders related to insulin resistance. My target is also those people who have the genetics for diabetes, high cholesterol, and cardiovascular disease. And this is easy to identify whether we have that genetics or not. If we have one or both the parent who have these conditions, there's a higher likelihood that we have those genetics as well. And also people in sedentary jobs and those who follow sedentary lifestyle. It may not be apparent to some people that when you have a sedentary job, it takes a lot of toll on your body. One that is not immediate, it manifests itself over some time. So, my goal is, through this podcast is to make these people aware that sedentary jobs will take some years off their life and that they should actively try to incorporate some kind of physical activity and hard training and pay attention to their nutrition as well. So, this is our first episode, and in this first episode, we are going to talk about what is insulin resistance, the markers to identify it, how can we test if there are any blood tests or some other clinical tests which will clarify whether we have insulin resistance or not. So, in today's episode, we are going to cover the basics of it. So, let's get started with the question, what is insulin resistance? As we can see from the figure, insulin resistance is nothing but a dampened cellular response to the hormone insulin, and we have a compensatory hyperinsulinemia. Now, don't get bogged down by the long words. I will explain it to you in just a moment. Insulin, as you may know, is the hormone that our pancreas produces to manage the blood sugar. When we have food, our blood sugar level goes up. In response to that blood sugar, the pancreas releases insulin. What insulin does is it shuttles all that sugar from the blood into the muscle, fat, and liver so that the blood glucose level stays close to 90 milligram per deciliter, which is what most doctors say that is the healthy blood glucose limit. When we have insulin resistance, the cells stop responding to the insulin signal as well as they should. So what ends up happening is that there is an excess of blood glucose, and to mitigate the situation, to make that situation better, the pancreas produces even more uh, insulin. Now, the cells have already become insulin resistant. By producing more insulin, the body hopes to get that blood sugar normal, and it manages to achieve that for a while before the cells become completely insulin resistant, and then at that point of time the the body may produce as much insulin as it wants, but the sugar does not go down, the blood sugar level does not go down. So that is where we have the classic diabetes. Now, so compensatory hyperinsulinemia is, I hope it is clear now, but I will explain it to my listeners who are joining me on the audio version only. Uh, Compensatory hyperinsulinemia. Hyper is more, insulinemia is the condition where we have insulin release. So hyperinsulinemia in its entirety becomes more insulin release, and compensatory is in response to. So when the cells stop responding to the amount of insulin that the pancreas is releasing, the body produces more insulin. So that is compensatory hyperinsulinemia. So how is insulin resistance identify, or what are the characteristics of it? If you happen to see somebody's blood report, how do you know that this person has insulin resistance or not? So these people, they have high average blood sugar. I'm not talking about fasting blood sugar, it's the high average blood sugar. It's very common marker these days. You just have to pay attention to it. If your blood sugar marker is more than 120, average blood sugar is more than 120 milligrams per deciliter, plus you have high fasting insulin, and also you have high triglycerides and VLDL. And you may ask, what is the link between these things? So as I explained in the previous slide, that high fasting insulin is to enable the cells to take up the blood sugar, because the cells are not responding as well as they should. So the body produces more insulin, and in response the cells become even more resistant to insulin. So both these markers are high, and when the blood sugar is pretty damn high, now it's a toxic situation for the body overall. So the liver takes up a lot of that excess sugar. It converts that excess sugar into fat, and uh, packs it into low density cholesterols and send it for storage all over the body. So that is why we see all these three things, three four markers being very high. So, and also it should be very enlightening, I believe, to know that that insulin resistance precedes diabetes by at least 2 to 5 years. So, like once you have insulin resistance, when you have been clinically told that you have insulin resistance, and if you do not control your lifestyle, if you do not include some kind of an exercise, if you do not rectify your nutrition pattern, there's a high likelihood that you will get diabetes in the next 2 to 5 years, and on a longer time range you are surely getting diabetes. So uh, insulin resistance is the beginning sign that you are heading towards a disastrous path, and that we need to get our act right. So you may ask, so the blood sugar is high, who cares, and why pay attention to IR? So the reason is, insulin resistance is not an isolated condition. Insulin resistance, as you can see from the picture, it's like a monster with many branches. So it starts off as just plain insulin resistance where the blood sugar is high, but over time it becomes so that you start getting gout, you have pain in your joint because of the uric acid crystals that your kidneys are not able to filter out. You get obesity, cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes. As we have discussed, it, insulin resistance precedes diabetes by at least 2 to 5 years. So diabetes is there. High cholesterol, dyslipidemia is where your fat markers, triglycerides, cholesterols are all over the place. Hypertension again is implicated to insulin resistance, because that excess insulin it causes your arteries and veins to become hard, and that increases the pressure. So hypertension is their condition. In women, PCOS and fibroids are also implicated to uh, insulin resistance. Why, you may ask? Because the cells are not responding. So uh, the reason for that is that insulin has many roles in our cells. Two most important of them are one, that it signals the cells to take up sugar out of the blood. Second, it signals the cells that the energy is available for division or for multiplication. So the cells multiply. This effect is known as mitogenic effect of insulin. When the cells multiply in response to insulin, it is known as the mitogenic effect of insulin. So in insulin resistance, unfortunately, the cells stop doing the first function, which is the uptake of sugar, but they do not stop the second function altogether. They remain very susceptible to the signal that there is energy available, and hence it should multiply. So fibroids is nothing but an uncontrolled growth in uterus, and it's a painful condition. It can be treated surgically if it is especially painful or it's too big, and if it is creating a problem for the person. But its roots are again found in insulin resistance. Also, another way insulin affects that is that when you have high insulin level, your the sex hormone system, it gets a little out of control. So your estrogen and your testosterone levels are off, and because you have more fat or obesity, as we say, around the waist, as insulin resistance gets progressively worse, the testosterone that your body should create is converted by the fat in your belly into estrogen. So that again signals for the multiplication of uterine cells, and that is how you get fibroids. So yes, stopping insulin resistance or managing insulin resistance take care of all these disorders, maybe some more, but these are the disorders that will be very much controlled if we have taken care of insulin resistance. So therefore, we need to pay attention to insulin resistance, especially when we have just acquired it. As it gets to stay in the body for longer, it gets progressively more difficult to manage. Other identifying signs of insulin resistance. So blood test is one and the topmost marker. What are the other markers that may prompt you to take up the blood test, or it may, like worry you enough to take up a blood test, or even consult a doctor for the same, for that matter. The first and foremost is darkening of skin. So this condition is known as acanthosis nigricans. So in this condition, we get like darkening of skin in the armpits, in the genital areas, under breast for ladies. This is, I believe, is ankle. Yeah. You get a darkening of skin, darkening of lips, darkening of tongue. So, yeah, darkening of oral cavity as well. So, you can see that this person over here, he has his oral cavity, his jaws are dark as well. This is a result of insulin resistance. It is acanthosis nigricans is a very good indicator that your body has become insulin resistant. Another sign of insulin resistance is skin tags. So skin tags is these small growths on your skin. If you see that you have suddenly gotten more of these growths on you, and it should be a sign alarming enough that you should take an insulin resistance test. Along with, if you have this, along with darkening of the skin and the other what's it, symptoms, such as number of moles that have increased, if you have constant depression, if you have lethargy all the time, frequent allergies and gut issues. So In the future episodes, we I will talk about the relation between uh, insulin resistance and all of these conditions extensively. Uh, but for now, know that if you have two, three, or maybe all of these signs, you should take a blood test and consult a doctor. Maybe reach out to me as well. I will leave my number at the end of the podcast so that you can reach out to me. Right. So as I have said, what how do you know whether you have insulin resistance or not? A simple blood test with the following parameters, as I mentioned earlier: average blood glucose, fasting insulin, HbA1c. Not fasting glucose, because fasting glucose levels change from time to time. What we need to see is HbA1c. HbA1c is what percentage of your blood was joined with the glucose in the past 2 3 months. So HB is hemoglobin, and A1C is the protein that carries the glucose on it. So percentage of the percentage of the blood that is joined with the glucose in the past 3 months is a pretty good indicator of how well your body is managing its blood sugar. So ideally, HbA1c should be less than 5.6. Above 5.6 is the beginning of the diabetes. Triglycerides, your VLDL or cholesterol markers. Now, what causes insulin resistance? So, at the core of it, insulin resistance is a disorder of energy balance. So, if you have a high energy intake and low energy utilization, your cells then do not want to take up extra nutrients out of the blood to power itself, because it already has a surplus. Any more nutrient, because when a cell takes up any substance in it, it also takes up water along with it, and then it swells, it threatens its existence. So when the cell has high energy availability and low energy utilization, the cells do not need any more energy, and if you continue to eat in that manner, the cells stop taking up all that glucose. Your the blood sugar stays in the sugar stays in the blood, and it creates many more other disorders, such as hypertension or high cholesterol for that matter. uh, Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is also one of the manifestations of insulin resistance: high energy intake, low energy utilization. Also, when the cells have an excess of energy and it is not being utilized, it leads to oxidative damage. When we take antioxidants, we are trying to reverse oxidative damage. Oxidative damage is damage due to uh, certain compounds of oxygen that are produced as a natural byproduct of the cell's functions. So when the energy intake is high, utilization is low, oxidative damage grows up, especially in the fat cells. When this when the body is disposing of excess blood glucose, it tends to store most of it as fat, primarily in the fat tissues. And the fat tissues have a specific size. And that size is genetically determined. You cannot alter that size, unfortunately. So when the fat cells grow beyond a certain point, they start to secrete certain inflammatory signals, cellular signals, which then attract the immune system to act on these fat cells, which in response to that, the fat cells produces more inflammatory signals such as interleukin 6, TNF alpha, which TNF alpha stands for tumor necrosis factor alpha, and it is one of the primary indicators of inflammation as well as cancer growth in the body. So uh, when the body gets this inflamed, plus high energy availability is there, utilization is not there, the cells become insulin resistant. So all of this combines to make the cell insulin resistance, and it does not happen very quickly. It takes years for the body to become insulin resistant, and the body tries to fight that condition for some years more, but eventually it gives up and you end up with diabetes. So that is how diabetes comes into existence. What next? What can be done about insulin resistance? So, as we have seen in the previous slide, that it is a disorder of excess intake and not enough utilization. We should start there. So, we should fix the diet, as in, we should manage the amount of food that we are eating. If you are a sedentary person, you may not need to eat uh, as much as you used to eat when you were maybe in college or when you used to be physically active. But as your lifestyle changes, your food habit should change. Your food intake has to go down. Now, one way to do that is by being more mindful when you are eating, but that may not be as easy in the beginning. So, tracking what you are eating is a very good idea to introduce some kind of a calorie control. Also, changing the composition of your diet. When you have excess glucose in the diet, and mind you, everything that we eat, whether it is rice, whether it is roti, you do not need to eat sugar to get sugar in the blood. The roti, the starch in the rotis, the starch in the rice, the starch in the dals, everything gets converted to glucose in the intestine. So your diet must contain a big portion of lean protein. It could be meat, it could be eggs, it could be milk, it could be whey protein, it could be fish. So you have options for introducing uh, lean protein in your diet, controlling the amount of carbohydrate in the diet, and also introducing certain fat in the diet. Getting rid of all fat in the diet is not a good idea. So even the medical uh, literature says that at least 10 to 15% of your diet, of your calories, should come from fat. So we need to have some fat, but not in excess, because again, if the starch that we eat gets converted to glucose, the fat that we eat is either utilized as fuel or is directly stored as fat. So that's not going to help us either. If we have a high fat diet, high calorie, high fat, high carbohydrate diet, these things are not going to help. So we have to reduce the calories, reduce the amount of carbohydrate, and introduce more protein rich food. Also, I would like to bring the attention of my listeners to the fact that we cannot go indiscriminately high in protein intake, because again, protein, when consumed in excess to what is needed, is converted to blood sugar, and then the cycle will go on. So we have to be very mindful of how we are eating, what we are eating, and how much we are eating. So if you need some help with that, you can contact me. I will leave my number after the session, after this, after the presentation. Introduction of physical exercise. Fixing the diet, it works on the energy intake part. Introduction of physical exercise takes it takes care of the energy utilization part. When we are exercising, we are utilizing the energy stored in the cell. We are utilizing the fat for energy, for producing energy, and therefore the cells become hungry, and later on they start taking out nutrient, glucose and fat from the blood, and thereby cleaning up the system. So what kind of exercises should we do? If you have been sedentary for any period of time, I would recommend that you start at walking. Walking is the easiest most convenient, most approachable form of exercise for anyone. Uh, do not go and start doing sprints. Do not go start doing uh, uh, heavy weights and everything. Start at walking. Slowly, gradually introduce weights. Slowly, gradually introduce high speed training, sprints and jumps and all of that. But it should be gradual. I will make my next episode on this particular topic about how to start exercising, how should we progress or how should we pace it. Sleep and hydration, number three. So, so a lot of studies they identified that lack of sleep directly contributes to insulin resistance. It may be because of the increased inflammation, it may be because of certain other things, but sleep directly causes uh, insulin resistance, lack of sleep, that is. So we need to fix a period of night where we are getting undisturbed sleep. And ideally, we should get from 6 to 8 hours of sleep. More than 9, 10 hours, more than 8 hours of sleep may, is okay if you have trained particularly hard, but not okay if you don't train too much. And, anyways, if you don't train at all, you may not be as sleepy. So, lack of sleep is a contributing factor to insulin resistance, and sleeping enough is single most effective way of rectifying that disorder. So sleep enough, 6 to 8 hours. Hydration, if you drink sufficient water you will be less hungry, you will eat less food, also you will become more in tune with the hunger signals of the of your body. So that is how drinking water helps. Also, when you drink lots of water, it gives you that extra energy that helps you go and do your work. uh, I will not say that drinking a lot of water helps you burn fat. It does not happen, it does not work that way. So when you drink water you are more energetic, you tend to take up physical activity more easily when you have more energy. Next is stress management. So I cannot stress this enough that stress management is important, because when you are stressed, your body produces a hormone called cortisol. Now, cortisol is not all bad, but when cortisol is in excess, it prompts your liver to produce more glucose. Your liver can produce glucose from proteins, from fat also, not fat, certain part of the fat. So it causes a big spike in sugar. When you are stressed, your sugar level tend to go up, and therefore managing your stress should be a priority if you are thinking about controlling insulin resistance. And finally, and most important, is taking proper treatment. I know many people who will not take the proper medicines that are prescribed for them to manage their condition, and they will go on and do uh, weird experiments with themselves. So, proper medications, the medications that lower blood sugar, produce insulin, that control cholesterol in your body, these medications can and will save your life if you have diabetes, high cholesterol, and all of that. Do not fall for the trap that there are certain therapies that can like get you off medications, uh, that can reverse your condition. Once you get diabetes, you have diabetes. You can only manage it so well that you do not need so many medications, or you need very little medication, but you will never reverse it. The diabetes is never reversed, and therefore take proper treatment. Do not fall for promises of reversal of the condition. uh, you cannot reverse diabetes. You can manage it well. You can manage it exceptionally well, to the point that you will not have uh, a lot of symptoms, a lot of discomfort are associated with the condition, but you cannot reverse it. All right. So, those who listen to my podcast, this was my first episode ever. Uh, Thank you for tuning in. I hope you derived some value out of this first episode. I will continue to make such informative episodes, and if you like this episode, consider sharing it with your friends. Consider sharing it with your family members who may be suffering from insulin resistance, or those who have diabetes, cholesterol, hypertension, so that I may be able to reach them as well. My goal is to reach as many people as possible, help them manage their condition, because reversal does not happen. uh, Thank you so much. If you need help with managing your condition, whether it is with exercise or with nutrition, you can reach me on WhatsApp on this number, 96102 12969.